So, Avengers Secret Wars is on its way. The culmination of everything that Marvel's been doing post-Endgame and its Multiverse Saga. With this movie's announcement and the introduction of characters like the X-Men and other mutants also in the pipeline, it's led to a lot of people expecting the MCU to reboot itself. Reboots are no stranger to the comic book source material, even DC's doing their own cinematic restart with James Gunn's DCU. The Marvel Cinematic Universe started all the way back in 2008, and after 16 years of stories, is it time for them to follow suit? And so today, I wanted to give my thoughts on a potential MCU reboot and how I'd go about telling that story and setting up that world. Whether it be a soft reboot or a complete resetting of the timeline and starting from scratch, what should stay and what should go, what source material can we pull from, and how do you manage such a big change for general audiences without alienating the existing stories and the cultural impact of the previous universe? If you ask me, it's simple. You cast Robert Downey Jr. as every single character. I mean, after Doom, I guess anything's possible, so like, why not? This is not going to be the MCU is dying type of video. I've covered that concept a lot in the past, and there are more complicated factors to it that apply to the movie industry as a whole and not just Marvel. And honestly, I've come to realize that conversation, like, we have it all the time, and it doesn't really have a ton of weight to it, and it's just very reactionary. Discourse just made to draw in clicks and get you to read lazy AI-generated articles that are just littered with ads. Which is why this video is brought to you by Pi. Pi is a completely free ad blocker that helps you take control of your online experience. Visit your favorite websites like IMDb, or Amazon, or even the Google homepage, and you can literally see the ads disappearing in real time with their visual mode. You can block out all ads, or the thing that I really like is you can choose to opt into certain ads and even get rewards for it. 50% of the US already uses an ad blocker, so you might as well get paid to doom scroll. There's also Pi Shopping, where they give you cash back and automatically apply coupons on over 10,000 stores. You just check out with something in your cart, you click apply coupons, and look at that, it's already done. Honestly, Pi has been great. It's all you really need in a browser extension, and it makes the new age of the internet so much more usable. Go to pi.org/TroyBoy017 to add it to your browser, and they also have a mobile Safari extension you can install on your iPhone through this QR code. Thanks to Pi for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my patrons for able to get all my videos early and interruption-free for just $1 a month. I could go on for hours about what Marvel is and isn't doing right, how they seemingly don't want to take risks anymore, they put restrictions on the creatives involved, yada yada yada, we'd be here all day. And so instead, I really want to focus in on just this idea of a reboot. Personally, I don't think the MCU needs a full-on reboot. I don't want to see just a return to the same stuff from 2008 but with a fresh coat of paint. We're just now starting to get to see a lot of interesting legacy characters like Ms. Marvel and Sam Wilson's Captain America in the spotlight, characters that I really love that it would be frustrating to throw that away and just go back to square one. Not to mention a full-on hard reset would likely overcomplicate things for more casual audiences and alienate new fans even more. We've seen it in the comics 100 times, namely when it comes to DC, who's become notorious for their reboots. What in theory seems like a good way to get people jumping on and interested in the stories actually does the opposite and alienates people. It's a band-aid solution that can lead to bigger issues, which is why newer initiatives like Rebirth and All In are focusing more on creative shakeups with new teams and jumping on points instead of full-on resets. By the way, when I say casual audiences, if you clicked on this video, I am not talking about you. I'm talking about like my mom. The new DCU is looking to be fantastic, but that's only because the previous DC universe basically needed it after years and years of bad decisions and poor leadership. And I don't want that to become the norm. But the reality is, with Secret Wars and Doomsday, it's looking more and more likely that that's the direction that Marvel's headed in. I said that like the Costco guy, like double chunk chocolate cookie, whatever, that's not relevant, never mind. And I will admit, you can't deny that after Avengers Endgame in 2019, the MCU as a whole hasn't really had the same level of cultural impact that it used to. Sure, Spider-Man and Deadpool were huge, but those felt more MCU adjacent than anything, and that hype hasn't really been the same for the mainline stuff. Maybe it wasn't the best idea after all to name it Endgame. Just like in hindsight, you know? Now there's over a decade and a half worth of movies and TV shows that it can be kind of a daunting task to ask someone to get into. And not to mention, because of company politics and movie rights, this universe was forced to start without the rights to its heavy hitters, and now it's trying to work that mythos in after the fact. And so that's the main thing I would want to focus on if I were to hypothetically start a new Marvel universe from scratch. For decades, the Marvel brand was held up by essentially 4 pillars: Spider-Man, X-Men, the Hulk, and Fantastic Four. The Avengers, while definitely a premier team, don't get me wrong, weren't nearly on that same level. The book was originally created in 1963 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby using a team of essentially failing comics at the time. Captain America was losing popularity after the war, and Iron Man was still pretty unknown, with Hulk and Thor being the biggest names to draw readers in. Over the years, the Avengers grew in popularity with some amazing stories, but it's not really a secret to say that they were seriously overshadowed by the massive success of their more popular peers. In the 90s, Marvel had serious financial problems, filing for bankruptcy in 1996. And so, to stay afloat, they decided the best option was to license the movie rights to their characters off to various studios. Spider-Man went to Sony, Blade went to New Line Cinema, Hulk and Namor went to Universal, and X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Daredevil went to Fox. Some characters like Hulk they shared the rights to, but others were sold off entirely. It was a decision that literally saved the company, but when 2008 rolled around, they were missing so many of their heavy hitter characters for their new cinematic universe. To put it bluntly, those limitations in company politics are the only reason that the MCU were a main focus in this universe. If they had the rights to Spider-Man and X-Men back in 2008, the whole landscape of the MCU would be totally different than it is today. We probably would have still gotten a Captain America movie, as he was still a pretty big name, but we might not have even seen Iron Man until the mid-2010s. Granted, I think that those limitations and the risk to use lesser known characters is a huge reason why the MCU was able to thrive in the first place, but at the same time, it's something that I wish we'd kind of seen. A Marvel universe with essentially zero restrictions. And so if we're going to be rebooting now with so many more characters at our disposal, this could be that chance to see what that might look like. If you were a kid during the early 2000s who was even remotely interested in superheroes, you've probably seen this before. This artwork is from a line of merchandise by Scott Johnson from 2003 to 2008. This art was everywhere. Toys, backpacks, lunchboxes, posters, fucking mac and cheese boxes, literally everywhere. To me, growing up, this was Marvel. Before any movies or TV shows or video games, this was the art and the representation for these characters that I saw on a daily basis. It is 100% my nostalgia talking, but I honestly think it might be some of the most influential and iconic art for these characters this side of Jim Lee and Alex Ross. And it's a really great lens into what the priorities were for the company before the MCU and the Avengers hit it big. This little speck is Scarlet Witch and Vision. Fucking Angel gets more screen real estate. And so in this perfect world where Marvel had complete control over all their characters' movie rights, that's what I would want to try and capture. My phase one would be a Spider-Man movie, an X-Men movie, a Fantastic Four movie, a Hulk movie, and a Daredevil movie. Maybe building up to the Avengers down the line with an Iron Man or a Captain America, but not making that team a big focal point just yet. Instead, having S.H.I.E.L.D. in the background while the stories focus on the street level aspects and building out the identity of Marvel's New York. The Daily Bugle, the Baxter Building, Xavier's Mansion, Hell's Kitchen. I think the main appeal of something like the MCU is the idea of seeing that interconnected world, where all of these heroes cross paths because they basically live down the street from one another. It can definitely get kind of cluttered in the comics, don't get me wrong, but I'd love to see that smaller scale, world outside your window vibe brought to life within the live action and put to the forefront. And that's honestly all this video could be, just reject modernity, embrace tradition for 20 minutes, and that'd probably be enough for most people, but I'm not most people. Also, I genuinely don't know how I could make that a whole video. The reality is, in a post-2008 world, and definitely after 2012 with how huge the first Avengers movie was, I don't think that something like that would really be possible. It's not the 90s or the early 2000s anymore. The Avengers are household names. Someone like Iron Man has risen the ranks from C-list to A-lister, and that roster of characters is arguably more well-known than even a lot of X-Men characters, thanks entirely to the cultural juggernaut that is the MCU.
I'm the juggernaut, bitch!
And so it wouldn't really make sense to throw that away, even if post-2019 hasn't been exactly the same. Not to mention they still don't really have the rights to Spider-Man, and the whole deal with Sony is like a total mess that could honestly collapse at any moment. I think the more realistic plan is for Doomsday and Secret Wars to lead into a sort of soft reboot, which isn't too far off from what happened in the source material. The original Secret Wars comic was a 12-issue event by Jim Shooter, Mike Zeck, and Bob Layton from 1984. It was about a being known as the Beyonder, transporting a group of heroes and villains to a planet called Battle World and forcing them to fight it out for his amusement. Also, Spider-Man stepped in some goop. I hope that doesn't become a problem later. Almost 30 years later, Jonathan Hickman and Assad Ribic took that concept and elevated it with 2015's Secret Wars. Not only was it the culmination of Hickman's 6-year-long tenure for Fantastic Four and Avengers, it also made talking about these two books a fucking nightmare. The multiverse begins to collapse because of something called incursions, the collision of two universes, most notably the mainline 616 and Ultimate 1610 universes. And Doctor Doom getting the Beyonder's godlike power and ruling over a new patchwork battle world and ending in a face-off between him and Reed Richards. Oh god, I just remembered Robert Downey Jr. is gonna be Doctor Doom. I know I made a joke about it in the intro, but like every time I think about it, it's like I get punched in the gut. Right now with this Multiverse Saga, I think it's pretty clear that they're setting up for something similar, blending those two ideas, that we're building to the incursions and the eventual fight for this world's survival. I wouldn't be surprised if the plot of Doomsday takes cues from Time Runs Out from Hickman's Avengers run, which was the lead up to the event and introduced the incursions, including the ethical implications that came from these heroes destroying entire universes to save their own. Just throw in like 50 unnecessary multiverse cameos and there's your movie right there. And with the Avengers in one universe, the X-Men in another, and the Fantastic Fantastic Four in another, I think the most likely outcome is that this big event movie is going to lead to those three worlds being merged together. Not necessarily a reboot or restarting anything by any means, but just taking those three timelines, smushing them all into one, and just moving forward from there. It's an idea that I don't necessarily hate in concept. I kind of like the idea of these three big pillars of Marvel existing in separate planes before colliding with one another. That's actually kind of what happened with Miles Morales. He and the Maker, the Ultimate Reed Richards, were the only survivors from the Ultimate Universe, and his history sort of just got merged with 616 because he gave Molecule Man a cheeseburger. That was just one guy, so I'm not really sure how they'd go about two whole worlds, but I think that's going to be their excuse to introduce the X-Men and mutants as a whole into the universe. If you ask me, I think that they can totally fit into the MCU without rebooting or anything, and people are kind of overcomplicating that. I mean, they're basically already here, like with Ms. Marvel, Namor, and even Wanda to an extent, which is an idea that I will talk about more in an eventual X-Men video that I really want to make because I got ideas about it that I really like and I'm really excited about, but it's a lot. And X-Men fans are very difficult to please. This sort of crossing of the streams is kind of a messier way to go about all of this, and it's part of the reason I'm not really huge on a reboot to begin with. But if the future movies end up putting the mutants and the Fantastic Four at the forefront, with Avengers movies every once in a while that aren't like huge event movies, that could still be really exciting. But if they end up doing a hard reboot, you know, resetting the timeline and fully starting over, that's kind of a big ask. It's not like DC where you can just have Jason Momoa yell at the camera and then move right on to Superman. The MCU is just such a different beast, and I think the best way to go about something of that magnitude is to make it a story thread. Not just a single multiverse movie that ends in a reboot, but a longer running narrative that can do more and be more than just a simple reset. And instead turning that idea into a commentary and a deep dive into what makes these characters special. I would have the Secret Wars movie more based on the 1984 original comic, with heroes and villains fighting it out on Battleworld for the Beyonder with the promise of him granting their greatest desire if they win, but have the good guys lose. They're beaten by the villains, and the Beyonder grants them their greatest wish: to rule a world without heroes. The movie ends with a blinding light, and we cut to 15-year-old Peter Parker on a field trip to a science lab. A spider slowly descends from the ceiling and lands on him before a hand swings in and squashes it. And the Maker takes the spider and places it in a glass case as we enter the Ultimate Saga. The Marvel Ultimate Universe began in 2000 with Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley, and sparked an entirely new publication line, including Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Fantastic Four, and the Ultimates. This is not that, because that world was destroyed in Hickman's Secret Wars, and in 2023 the new Ultimate Universe was created, with a new Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Black Panther, and a new Ultimates. This follows Earth 6160, a world where the Maker and Evil Reed Richards went throughout time and prevented the world's greatest superheroes from ever being created. And not just that, he has a council of supervillains in the shadows, puppeteering governments and organized crime throughout the world to maintain his control. Everybody's talking about Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto, and for good reason. It's a great book. It's such a breath of fresh air compared to other Spider-Man comics we've been getting for so long. But my favorite of this line has actually been The Ultimates by Dennis Camp and Juan Frigeri. This might honestly be the best Marvel comic in years. Not only is it a great superhero book and a great exploration of this Ultimate Universe, but it's such a radical and scathing critique of bigger social issues that apply to our real world. There are things being said and topics explored in this comic that I never in a million years would have expected to come from a big two publication. The second issue is about Captain America waking up from the ice and coming to terms with how America was systematically built upon violence and oppression and capital. Could you imagine if the MCU was able to capture even a fragment of that sauce? When translating these ideas into the movies, you could have it all be spearheaded by Dr. Doom, basically merging the new Ultimate stuff with 2015 Secret Wars. But the Maker is such a fun and interesting villain, and I'd love to see him get the spotlight. If they wanted to be really cool in their big multiverse fest, they could bring back Miles Teller's Mr. Fantastic and do a twist where he went evil between movies and became the Maker, and he becomes the villain for this saga. Genuinely, I don't really care about a lot of these multiverse cameos, but that one needs to happen. Like it'd be too good. And so this Ultimate Saga would sort of be like a mix between the original Phase 1 and the first half of Endgame. We established that they have 3 years to prepare and fight the Maker. And with each movie, we introduce each character in this new Ultimates team and explore this twisted world a little bit more, before eventually building up to this final showdown and leading to that more traditional reboot. But now, after this whole saga, it would feel like we earned it. For now, Tony Stark is 19, and his dad Howard is still alive and was the one who first built the Iron Man armor. You can take inspiration from not just the Ultimate Universe, which is doing some really interesting stuff as him like potentially being Kang in the future, but also from Iron Man Armored Adventures, which was a super underrated show. Steve Rogers is still lost in the ice and is only now just being recently uncovered. Peter Parker is in his mid-30s, married with kids, and is now just starting to be Spider-Man after actively choosing to do so. Some of these changes could just be temporary, but some of them could end up being permanent and ways to introduce audiences to newer and younger versions of the characters for the future. Like, I think having an adult Peter in the movies would be such a refreshing and nice change of pace from how high school focus the character's been for decades. And it could be fun to flip the Peter-Tony relationship on its head like that, and maybe now that we have an older Peter, it could eventually lead to Miles showing up. Ultimates is also introducing not just variations of existing characters, like a Thor who's a prisoner of Asgard, but also some radically different interpretations, like She-Hulk who's the victim of nuclear bomb testing, or a Native American Hawkeye who blows up oil rigs with their arrows. There's also a version of Reed Richards who the maker basically traumatized so much that he's a broken shell of a man and wears a Dr. Doom mask, which still better than Robert Downey Jr. Now, these comics are super new. I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man is only 10 issues in, and it might be too soon to translate them to the movies, but we've seen fast adaptations before, like with Kick-Ass, which was filmed before the comic even finished and turned out a million times better than the book did. And I think it could be such a fun experiment to see these movies take so strongly from a new era of comics that have such a clear place to start for new readers, and in theory, push them even harder with the adaptations. Plus, the MCU's already taken a lot of inspiration from the old Ultimate Universe, so why not pull from this new one too? One set of characters that I really want to see get a spotlight is Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym. I think that Scott Lang is a great character, and I love Paul Rudd in one Ant-Man movie, but Hank and Janet are such pivotal Marvel characters that haven't really been given the spotlight that they need. Janet especially is essentially the heart and soul of the Avengers team, the glue that holds them together, and it was crazy to me that they just cast her aside. And so a potential reboot is the chance to amend that. And this saga could also open the door for the mutants to get a spotlight. Ultimate X-Men by Peach Momoko is amazing so far. She's really leaning into the horror elements and focusing on the smaller scale, but you could use this to introduce something a bit more classic too. Maybe the maker overlooked them, didn't realize that they existed, and now without the other heroes of the world, that's had the spotlight thrust upon mutant kind as a whole, whether they want it or not, and all the bigotry that comes with that, leading to the formation of the X-Men. And there could be this sort of false hope that maybe in a world not ruled by the maker, mutants could live freely. The thing that I really like the most about this Ultimate Universe is this feeling of rebellion. Something was literally taken from these characters, and the world is worse off because of it, and they're fighting to take it back. There's something so gratifying about all these characters who are normally at the top of the totem pole becoming underdogs and forced to claw their way back. And so when this saga is over and we end up getting the more traditional Marvel reboot, it's more satisfying because we feel like we actually earned that and fought for it instead of just rebooting for reboot's sake. When the MCU was first created, it was kind of revolutionary, not just for its interconnected nature, but also for the scope of the whole thing in the long term. We're not used to movie franchises spanning 40 or 50 movies. Most are usually lucky to get to 4. The only things really comparable are James Bond and Godzilla, which are more anthology than anything, or Fast and Furious of all things. But comics are a long-form medium with essentially infinite stories. These characters have more in common with a trashy soap opera that's been on for 20 years than they do your average action hero. Marvel especially has characters that have literally 60 years worth of continued stories. They've managed to maintain this universe and this timeline for the most part the same for all these years. It's part of what makes getting into comics such a daunting task, but also what gives them their identity and what makes them so rewarding. Any Doctor Who fan will tell you that that's part of the charm of these long-running narratives. And we've seen in the past that an attempt to reboot and start fresh has potential to work and bring in new and old audiences alike, but it also has potential to cause even bigger problems down the line, alienating the people who fell in love with the world and the characters in the first place. These are movies based on comic books, and one of the biggest strengths about the medium is the ability to reinvent themselves and evolve, to give creators and people with a vision the tools and the resources to take these characters in bold new directions and breathe new life into these stories. So we can repeat the mistakes of the comics industry and reboot, keep slapping a band-aid on it over and over again until the world dies of a heat death from the sun. Or we can learn from those mistakes, grow, innovate, roll with the punches, and keep moving forward. But do you think the MCU needs a reboot, and what would be your phase 1 if you could start this universe from scratch? If you liked this video, be sure to the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Also the Sting, Ans, Anus425, Cabbage Boy, Cassidy, Caroline Brenneman, Chicken McDoofus, Dan, Danny Boy, Eden Kenna, Egan McFarlane, Evan Bowers, Fastest Man Dead, Finn Yates, Hannah C, Harper Sires, Howard Bell, If You Know You Know, Iron Ninja, Jake Selig, Kai Dead, Ken, Glass Bear Productions, Morpy, Murn09, Popcorn Eater 123, Raptor 77, Sherbet, Slapstick, Slushy, Spectacular Clyde, TDW Fan, Theo Crouch, Tim Neufeld, Choices by Rachel's Lame, Tyler Goodrich, and Yash Kapoor for being spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. Be responsible, and I'll see you around.